Hi there, and welcome to The Wrap. Simple news updates for busy people. Brought to you by me, Verashni Pillay, and explained@COSA. And welcome to the new version of The Wrap, sent out on a Monday instead of a Sunday. We've moved as we've celebrated our 1-year anniversary of sending out this WhatsApp newsletter. Please let us know what you think of this new delivery time and how it works for you. On the show today, we give you our take on how South Africa stands or falls depending on our actions as citizens, plus a win-win solution for growing the economy. Then there's the usual big story, news in brief, and the international story. So, let's dive right in. Our take. Let's demand an alternative future. It's difficult not to feel dismayed as South Africa's COVID-19 cases and deaths soar, and stories of poor conditions at hospitals multiply. We've had one of the harshest lockdowns in the world, and it succeeded in delaying our peak of infections. But over the past week, concerns have been voiced in many media outlets that the time was not used widely to prepare, as our leaders promised it would be. Our national leaders like President Cyril Ramaphosa and Health Minister Zweli Mkhize have led us well, but planning seems to have broken down at the provincial level. This has exposed chronic failures in local governance that Ramaphosa's reform has not been able to reach. Stories of shocking conditions in Eastern Cape hospitals are extremely concerning, as are those of Gauteng field hospitals still not ready to receive patients as the province reaches its peak. Now, the number of our cases nationally is high, but thankfully our death rate is still very low compared to the rest of the world, 1.38% versus over 4%. Writing about these concerns in the Sunday Times yesterday, former Deputy Minister of Finance, Mcebisi struck the right balance between caution and hope. He quoted famous political scientist Francis Fukuyama, who has pointed out that the pandemic has exposed populist leaders and proven the mettle of effective, stable governments. So those are two types of governments and countries that have emerged from this pandemic. Now, which one South Africa falls into depends on us. As Mcebisi says, this is the moment that civil society, the private sector, and the citizenry at large needs to awaken and demand an alternative future. We agree. Meanwhile, on to solutions. A win-win solution. Last week, I was a part, as if they'd planned it, both the ANC and a coalition of businesses released plans for rebuilding our economy. They're from the opposite ends of the political spectrum. The ANC has the more leftist developmental state model, which veers towards socialism, and Business for South Africa's plan was far more detailed. But both plans agreed that in order to drive economic growth, we would need to use South African savings and retirement funds to finance infrastructure projects. Now, the idea of using retirement funds to bail out the economy has been controversial, especially when the idea of prescribed assets has been floated. This basically means forcing us or our retirement fund managers to invest part of our retirement in certain assets. Now, imagine if that asset was Eskom. I wouldn't want my retirement savings to go anywhere close to that. The consensus now, however, is far less intimidating and voluntary. It involves a change to Regulation 28 of the Pensions Fund Act, which controls how much of your retirement funds can be invested in different kinds of assets. The regulation is in place to ensure that your money is put into diverse investments, property, equity, etc. However, investing in infrastructure isn't really allowed for currently. Changing this regulation will free up money to help drive our economy again. If done right, it could be a very lucrative investment for our retirement money, considering that government's infrastructure plan includes a space hub, yes, in terms of outer space, and a whole new city right by Durban. In addition, a focus on infrastructure in general means building and improving schools, clinics, and roads, and helps us meet our developmental goals towards the country and its poor. Plus, it creates jobs, lots of them, for the low-skilled workers who need them most. And that's important because the first in-depth study of unemployment in South Africa, thanks to the pandemic, has been released, and it's chilling. It's called the National Income Dynamic Study, Coronavirus Rapid Mobile, which has possibly the worst acronym ever invented, NIDS-CRAM. It estimates that there are as many as 3 million jobs may have been lost, and most of those affected are low-income black earners. If done right, the change proposed both by the ANC and business to allow access to funds to drive growth may be a win-win solution. But it's a big if. But you can be sure we and many others will be keeping an eye on that and keeping you in the loop. The big story: schools to stay open. It's the biggest debate this week. Should schools stay open or should they close as the national peak draws closer? All 5 of South Africa's teacher unions are unanimous in their support for the immediate closure of schools, but school governing body associations are divided, the Sunday Times reported yesterday, in what amounts to a standoff between rich and poor. On one hand, public teacher unions are at the forefront in the call to close schools and reopen in August only, when South Africa is expected to be past its peak. They are concerned about a rise in infections, especially among teachers. More than 20 have died in Gauteng alone. On the other hand, an alliance made up of private schools, along with the Federation of Governing Bodies of South African Schools, the South African Human Rights Commission, and the Anglican Church, want schools to stay open. The SAHRC said that schools need to stay open because of 3 big reasons. 1, poor children rely on the school feeding schemes for their daily meal. 2, school is often a sanctuary for many children who otherwise face an increased risk of child abuse and mental health issues, with rising rates of depression and anxiety. And 3, if schools were closed, vast numbers of children would have to stay home alone while their caregivers go to work. So, what's next? Currently, grades R, 3, 6, 7, 10, 11, and 12 are back at school. Grades 3 and 10 are meant to return today. But Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga is expected to make an announcement soon on this ongoing back and forth and will hopefully find a workable middle ground between the 2 camps. Citing insider sources, City Press says the department is considering closing school for 2 to 3 weeks in a concession to unions. Remember though, as a parent, you will still be free to choose whether you want to send your kid to school or not. Moving on to your news in brief. Shorter self-isolation. On Friday, Health Minister Zweli Mkhize said the self-isolation period for COVID-19 has been reduced from 14 days to 10 days. The catch is that this is only if the patient does not have a fever and that their symptoms are beginning to improve. South African song trends worldwide. After being snubbed by the South African Music Awards, better known as the SAMAs, Master KG's December hit song, Jerusalema, is getting its revenge globally. The laid-back house track has got the world dancing to the trending #Jerusalema Dance Challenge, with dancers across the world doing their version of South Africa's famous bus stop or Ibasi dance. You know the one. It's the coordinated square dance we all kick into when Mafikizolo's Indihamba Nawe plays at weddings. The lid is coming off racism in South African cricket. Remember the uproar we told you about last week over Black Lives Matter and cricket? It's exposed all kinds of long-running racial wounds in the sport. Now on Friday, Makhaya Ntini, who in 1998 was the first black cricketer to play for South Africa, revealed the enormous burden he carried behind his trademark smile all those years. He said he preferred to run between stadiums and hotels where the Proteas were based instead of taking the Proteas team bus because of how his teammates avoided him. You'd watch friends calling each other and then making plans right in front of you, and then you'd be skipped, Ntini said in an interview with SABC. All sorts of wounds are coming to the fore, and while Cricket South Africa has gone to ground, many cricketers, black and white, are coming forward saying things need to change. Moving on to today in the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. Remember when former Bosasa Chief Operating Officer Angelo Agrizzi told the Zondo Commission of how his company bribed ANC and other officials? One of the most awful examples he gave was of former Minister of Environmental Affairs Nomvula Mokonyane, who he said received Christmas groceries, an Audi A3 for her daughter, and a 50,000 Rand monthly bridge payment, amongst other things, in exchange for influence over contracts. Now, her reckoning is here. Mokonyane is in the hot seat at the Commission this week. She is being questioned about her relationship with the family of former Bosasa CEO Gavin Watson, who died in a mysterious car accident last year. Bosasa has been reported to have paid huge bribes to the state to secure state contracts. Mokonyane has conceded that her relationship with the Watson family goes back to the struggle against apartheid, but she denies receiving any bribes. Of course. In case you missed it, no more load shedding for now. Lockdown is looking a little brighter, hint hint, after Eskom, in a surprise announcement on Thursday, suspended load shedding, saying that 4 generation units have been returned to capacity and that available capacity has risen to the highest this year so far. So let's hope it lasts. And one more last thing on in case you missed it, booze has been banned again. From everything the president addressed in his address last week, this little detail stood out. Alcohol sales are suspended with immediate effect. Ramaphosa said this is because too many alcohol-related casualties were taking up space in hospitals. To ease our concern, the South African Medical Research Council released a model which showed that it could take up to 8 weeks for trauma cases to reduce by 18% and free up space for COVID-19 patients. So it's looking like 8 weeks is perhaps the amount of time we'll have to wait before we can buy alcohol, but even that is not clear. Moving on to international news. Virus flip-floppers are now wearing masks. It looks like those who flip-flopped over the virus have landed up with egg on their face, or rather masks. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson wore a mask in public for the first time, as did Donald Trump, the US President. Boris Johnson pledged to hold an independent inquiry into the country's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. He said the country needs to learn the lessons of the outbreak. Masks are to be compulsory in shops in England from July 24th. Plus, just how messy can a divorce case get? Very, if Hollywood actor Johnny Depp's court war with his ex, Amber Heard, is anything to go by. Franchises that both the stars star in could be affected given the fallout. This includes the Fantastic Beasts series, which are Harry Potter spin-offs featuring Johnny Depp, and the Marvel Aquaman series featuring Amber Heard. Other actors like Depp's former partners Winona Ryder and Vanessa Paradis are getting dragged into the mudslinging, or rather the poo-slinging, as USA Today nicely summarizes. So far, the trial has featured claims from both sides about trash rooms, a locked-off fingertip, a teacup Yorkie dangled out a car window, plus translations of Depp's really weird antique American slang for the British judge, like haymaker and porcupines. And ickiest of all is the claim of human feces in a bed. Ew! Plus, legal pundits are also saying that the outcome of this case could change how the media can write about domestic violence going forward. Depp is suing the publisher of The Sun and its editor for describing him as a wife-beater. Lastly, in our international news wrap, famous civil rights leader passes on. John Lewis, a famous American civil rights leader who helped organize the Voting Rights March in Selma, Alabama, among others, and became a leading liberal voice for decades in the US, has died on Friday at the age of 80. After more than 40 arrests, physical attacks, and injuries, Lewis continued to advocate the philosophy of non-violence. He fought for a better world till the end, fighting against some of Trump's most harmful policies. And he really cared about universal rights outside of his country. He was arrested twice at the Sudanese embassy demonstrating against the genocide in Darfur, and once outside Congress calling for immigration reform. We love our featured photograph today, courtesy of the US Embassy in South Africa, of Lewis meeting with Nelson Mandela. Poetically, Lewis died the day before Mandela Day. When Mandela died 7 years ago, almost to the day, Lewis said of him, through his action in defense of human dignity, his unjust, brutal imprisonment, and his attempts to heal a nation, he demonstrated to all of us that we must never become bitter or hostile. He showed us that we each, despite our tribulation, have the power to forgive, that we can be reconciled with the worst offender. When he walked out of prison with grace, dignity, and pride, he taught us how to thrive as members of the human family. We're sure that Mandela would have said much the same about him. As we wrap up this wrap, in the week ahead, the South African Reserve Bank will announce its latest interest rate decision this week. The investment community is expecting yet another cut, making it the 5th for this year. We've explained what this previously means in this video. If you need a refresher, we've linked to it below the podcast. Secondly, the restaurant industry is expected to stage a massive protest called the Million Seats on the Streets on Wednesday to highlight the impact that lockdown restrictions have had on the industry. Tables and chairs will be used to block roads outside various restaurants between 12 and 2 p.m. as part of the peaceful demonstration. You can also expect more explosive or not explosive details coming out of the Zondo Commission and more details on lockdown regulations and the status of schools. That's it from us at The Wrap, a product of Explain.coza. Simple news summaries for busy people. Remember to share the love. Tell your friends to sign up for the updates at explain.coza/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from me and the rest of the Explain.coza team.